Hi, my name is Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and in this short video I'm going to address a question I've been asked by quite a few people about tilt-shift lenses and what effect it has using them on a crop sensor camera. Now, for most of my work, I'm an architectural photographer, industrial photographer. I use this, the Canon 5DS. It's a full-frame sensor. So that's a 36mm by 24mm sensor in it, same size as the old 35mm film, hence the sort of full frame name that has become popular to denote this. And typically I'll use it with Canon TSE-24, TSE-17mm, and they give me the look that I expect from a 24mm lens, a 17mm lens, so they're wide angle. Now, shift lets me expand the coverage because tilt and shift lenses work, and this is the 24 and it's on a Canon 100D, it's a crop sensor camera, so that's a smaller size, so I can't remember the dimensions of it, but you can look it up. It's slightly different for Nikon, slightly different for Sony, but it's a smaller sensor. This goes for Micro Four Thirds as well, where it's also a smaller sensor. Because these lenses work by having a big image circle, that's the image projected out the back of the lens, which falls on your sensor, which is the image you capture in the picture. Because of that, shift just allows you to see a different part of that image circle. So whilst it's easy to think with a crop sensor camera that you have a multiplier, an effective focal length multiplier, it's not a focal length multiplier. If I use this lens on either of these cameras, it's still a 24mm lens. The smaller sensor shows a smaller part of the image circle, which corresponds roughly to a longer focal length of that. So it's useful in that respect, in thinking that if I put a 100mm lens on the 100D, it will give the equivalent field of view of 160mm compared to on the 5DS here, the full frame one. So that's fairly basic stuff. Anyone who's used crop sensor cameras, full frame, FX, DX in Nikon terminology, anyone who's used that will be familiar with the change of the field of view. How does that affect with shift? Well, the easiest way to show it is to set the camera up, point it at a scene, do both cameras, full frame and a crop sensor, and just show the effect. Remember, shift is just using a different part of the image circle. So that should actually give us an idea of what we're going to see. But anyway, I'll start with the full frame. This is looking out in the corner of our conservatory where the bird feeders are, and I'm going to start this up with some vertical shift. Now it goes quite a way. There's 12mm of shift on the TSE-24, so it's a 24mm lens, and that was shifted up. Notice the centre point I'm aiming at is the bird feeders. Shift down, you can see some of the cacti, various other bits and pieces around in the conservatory. Now, that's just up and down shift. I can take an up shifted image, down shifted image, and I can stitch them. Now, if I swap it over and rotate the mechanism, and that is a simple tab on the side of the camera, I now get a shift to the left and a shift through the center position again to the right. And we go across there, and I'll take it back to that. So there you go, that is the amount of shift you get on a full frame camera. Now, if I stop that and change the camera at same lens, but we now go to the 100D, which is a smaller sensor. If I now look at a video shot with a 100D, immediately you can see it's a much narrower view. There's no change in perspective or anything because I haven't moved the camera. We shift up and we don't get quite so far. This LED lighting feature is not visible, and that's actually because there's a limitation with the lens in that when you shift up you can hit the top here, which is where the flash is. Now shift down, we've got full shift, so we've got 12mm of shift downwards, and you can see that this image no longer matches up at no shift with anything. And if I shift upwards again, oh no, I can see a robin has just landed, checking out any food. But what it means is that you get 12mm of shift, downwards, left, right. You get about 10mm in vertical shift. Now, horizontal shift here to the left. Not quite as much coverage as you get on the full frame sensor because the sensor extends further out. And if we go across the other way, we took over to the right, still not quite as much coverage, but obviously a smaller field of view. So if you make a stitch of these images, you need to actually take a center image and an up and down shifted image. So for a full set, that's vertical, that's down. So for a full set of images, you need to actually include the center and the shifted. So in the real difference you're getting is nothing more than just a smaller part of the same image. So shift works exactly the same. If to take a picture, I want to take an up-down shift, it was a tap on the bottom. If I want to take a simple up-down shift, single image, use it as I will. If I want to stitch them, I need to allow for the reduced coverage. Now, other than that, apart from, as I say, the potential of shift actually contacting the top of the camera here, that's the where the flash is, and the mirror box. Apart from that, the two work exactly the same. For tilt, there is no difference whatsoever. You use a 24mm lens on a crop sensor camera. You tilt it by so much, the plane of focus will be in a certain position. That relative position is exactly the same on the larger sensor as well. If I was to use this with an adapter on a medium format camera, then the amount of shift I would get would be the same. The focal length would still be 24, but obviously with a larger sensor, I have a larger image. So effectively, for tilt, there is no difference whatsoever. And for shift, it's just a smaller part of the image that you're seeing. So when you're using tilt and shift, a 24mm, you always treat it as a 24mm lens. I should say that on crop sensors it works just as well if you use teleconverters. I've done some stuff looking at teleconverter use as well, so it's exactly the same. So if you've got a crop sensor camera and you come by a tilt shift lens, by all means give it a go. You won't get the ultra wide angle that you get on the full frame, which is my reason for initially adopting to full frame camera in 2003, but it works exactly the same. So do have a look at the other videos I've made about covering tilt and shift, and of course there is my book I wrote about tilt shift lenses, available in all good bookshops and probably some not very good ones as well. Hope this has been of some use. Please feel free to ask some questions, because it's people asking questions that give me ideas for doing these little short videos. So thank you. Oh, and subscribe to the channel please if you find it interesting.